The Young and the Restless Spoilers. It began with an envelope. One for each guest. Thick, cream-colored, embossed with a black wax seal bearing the letter D. There were no names on the outside. No warnings. Only silence, which descended heavily as a dozen powerful figures within the train's grand dining car looked down at the paper in front of them like it might detonate. The flickering candlelight cast uneasy shadows across tense faces. Victor, Nikki, Adam, Nick, Victoria, Summer, Billy, Lily, Amanda, and Claire, all of them caught in the rising storm of Aristotle Dumas's final game. No one moved at first. But the curiosity was too heavy, the fear too poisonous. One by one, the seals were broken. One by one, lives began to shatter. Each envelope contained a single sheet. A single, carefully selected secret. Not gossip, not suspicion, but truth. Verified, documented, inarguable. These were Damas's weapons. And they were far more lethal than any gun or poison. Lily's hands trembled as she read a financial document implicating Devon in the misuse of Hamilton Winters Foundation funds that had been funneled anonymously into Damas's shell companies. She gasped, realizing her brother had been manipulated, or worse, complicit. Her eyes darted toward him, but Devon was already looking away, clutching his own letter, which revealed the truth about a paternity case he thought had been buried forever. A child he never claimed. Amanda stood frozen, her face pale, her hands slowly lowering a medical document exposing a long-held secret she'd fought to protect, a misdiagnosis she had covered up for a client, now linked to one of Damas's victims. Billy found photographs, grainy surveillance shots of him, drunk and reckless, leaving a child in the care of a stranger during a blackout episode years ago. Victoria stared in horror at a list of offshore accounts in her name, connected to a bribery scheme she had insisted was shut down years ago. And then there was Nick, holding a court document from decades ago, an annulled marriage, sealed and erased, to a woman no one in the family knew about. But none of those compared to the revelation that had landed in Victor's hands. Or, more precisely, in everyone's hands. A second envelope had been handed to the staff and passed around the train. This one wasn't tailored. It was meant for everyone to see. When they opened it, they found a single page, boldly stamped with official lab markings. A DNA test. Victor Newman. Audra Charles. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. The room fell into stunned silence. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered like the world that was now beginning to break apart. Victor didn't move. His eyes scanned the document 3 times, as if trying to decode it into something less horrifying. But it didn't change. The name was his. The match was clear. Audra, the woman he had once mentored, once manipulated, once used in more ways than he dared admit, was his daughter. Across the room, Nikki went pale. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. She stood there, stunned, then suddenly screamed, a sharp, wild cry that pierced the hush like a knife through silk. She grabbed the DNA paper and tore it apart with manic force, pieces fluttering like snow through the air. But it was too late. Everyone had seen it. Everyone knew. Victor's sins had come home again. He stepped forward, the roar of disbelief echoing through his mind as if underwater. His legs felt leaden. His chest ached. But he looked at Audra, truly looked, for the first time. And he saw it. The intensity. The pride. The cold mask she wore to hide the shattered child within. He saw her. And in that moment, Victor Newman, a man who had built empires and destroyed enemies, felt something he hadn't felt in years, regret. He moved toward her. Audra, still poised, still radiating controlled rage, didn't flinch. She thought he might accuse her. Deny her. Shout. But instead, he reached out and pulled her into his arms. It was awkward. Unfamiliar. She didn't return the embrace. But she didn't pull away. Because in spite of everything, in spite of betrayal, games, manipulation, she had spent her whole life aching to be seen. And now, the man who gave her life was holding her, wordlessly acknowledging a truth buried so deeply it had taken Damas to exhume it. "Who is her mother?" someone whispered. The question was a thunderclap. Victor looked up, as if waking from a spell. He hadn't thought of her in years. A woman from his past, from a time before his power was complete. She had been beautiful, brilliant, dangerous. A lawyer from Venezuela. They had spent a whirlwind summer together, and then she disappeared. No child. No letters. Only a silence that felt intentional. He had assumed she moved on. Married. Left that season behind. He had never searched. Never followed up. And now, here stood the result of that forgotten affair. The woman never came to Genoa City. Perhaps she couldn't. Or wouldn't. Maybe she had warned Audra not to trust Victor. Or perhaps she died before the truth could be told. But now, none of that mattered. Because the daughter had returned. Not for family. Not for love. But for reckoning. Adam, standing to the side, watched it all unfold in mute agony. All his life, he had struggled to prove himself worthy of the Newman name. He had clawed for recognition, battled Victor's impossible expectations, endured exile after exile. And now, another child appeared, a daughter who had never begged for crumbs, who had forced her way into the family's core by force, by cunning, by ruthlessness. And she hadn't been cast aside. She had been embraced. He turned away, fists clenched, jaw tight, the wound reopening in ways words couldn't touch. Aristotle Dumas watched from his private surveillance suite at the rear of the train, his face calm as a monk at prayer. This was what he wanted. Not just chaos. But collapse. The mighty brought to their knees not by bombs or bullets, but by the truth. By secrets. By the poisonous gravity of things unsaid. Victor sat down slowly, the weight of his legacy heavier than ever. Around him, allies became strangers. Lovers became adversaries. Children became enemies. Nikki sobbed quietly in a corner. Victoria stood frozen. Claire left the room in disgust. Billy drank. Devon paced. And Audra stood at the center of it all. No longer just a pawn. No longer just a spy. But a daughter who had taken her place, not by birthright, but by fire. And as the train roared through the dark French night, no one on board knew what the next stop would bring. But everyone knew the truth had already arrived. Would you like me to continue into what happens next, such as the fallout between Victor and Adam, or Audra taking control of the Newman legacy with Victor's blessing? The moment after the storm should have been quiet, but it wasn't. The train still hissed with tension, still groaned beneath the weight of disbelief and emotional ruin. Though no one spoke aloud, the psychic toll of what had just been revealed echoed in every movement, every breath. In one corner, Victor Newman sat, hands folded, gaze dark and unreadable, while Nikki stood a few feet away, unmoving, as if paralyzed by the weight of history crashing back into her chest. It wasn't just the DNA test that broke her. It was what it represented, an entire lifetime of loyalty now smeared with the blood of a past she never knew existed. She had fought for Victor, stood by him through affairs, betrayals, near-death experiences, and children conceived in shadows. But this revelation of a secret daughter, someone who had not only infiltrated their family but nearly destroyed it from within, cut deeper than she ever imagined possible. It wasn't the biology that wrecked her. It was the symbolism. Audra was not just another name on Victor's long list of complicated connections. She was a living monument to everything Nikki had never known about the man she married. And in that moment, all the years of silence, of sweeping things under the rug, came boiling to the surface. "I can't believe this," she whispered, voice cracking. After everything, Victor rose slowly. The weight of 1,000 memories bore down on his shoulders, but his tone was firm, almost gentle. "Nikki," he said, "you have every right to be upset. But this happened long before us. Before we were even us." He took a step closer, his eyes softening. "I didn't know." "If I had known," she turned to him, eyes red but burning with an anger not easily extinguished. "But that's the point, isn't it? You never cared to know. You left a woman behind. You left a child behind. And now she's here, breaking everything we built." Victoria stepped in, ever the voice of reason amid the chaos. "Mom," she said softly, "this isn't the time. Damas is still out there. He's the real threat." Nick nodded, arms crossed tightly across his chest. "She's right. Whatever Audra is to Dad, whatever she's been through, that's something we deal with back in Genoa City. But if we keep letting him divide us, then he wins." Victor's gaze locked with Nick's, father and son, two fractured leaders trying to hold a crumbling dynasty together. For all their past battles, their shared instincts now aligned. This was not the moment to bleed. It was the moment to brace. To fight. But not everyone was prepared to fall into line. In the shadows of the corridor, Audra Charles stood alone. Her breath shallow, her jaw clenched so tightly it ached. She had heard every word. Every plea for patience. Every attempt at diplomacy. And none of it mattered. Because in her heart, the truth was too bitter to swallow. She had been abandoned. Forgotten. Reduced to a pawn, a tool, an afterthought. For years, she had scraped her way through the world with nothing but her wit and rage. Her mother had been strong, brilliant, even, but bitter. She raised Audra not with lullabies, but with hard truths. Your father didn't want you. Your father chose power over us. You are on your own. And now she saw him, that man, holding court, speaking of peace, asking for time. Acting like the revelation of her existence was a footnote in a larger crisis. Like she hadn't bled for his absence. Like her pain was just another item to be resolved in a boardroom back in Genoa City. She couldn't breathe. The walls of the train seemed to close in on her. Because it wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was insult. She walked away. Fast. Silent. Rage boiling beneath her skin like a storm beneath a frozen lake. Victor may have claimed her as his daughter, but he had never earned the right. Not yet. Not ever. Inside the train, Victor noticed her leave. His body tensed. Nikki watched him with a mixture of disdain and heartbreak. "You're going to chase her now?" she asked, voice brittle. "After all this?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I should have years ago." He left the cabin. The Newman family remained, shattered, silent, and still somehow functional, bound together not by love anymore, but by necessity. Damas was still out there, still watching, still waiting for the next crack in their armor. They couldn't afford another mistake. Not now. But in the rear section of the train, behind the security door, Aristotle Dumas watched the feeds with the satisfaction of a master composer listening to his symphony of destruction. The Newman Empire, so proud, so indestructible, had begun to rot from the inside. And all he had to do now was wait. Audra stood on the back balcony of the train, the wind tearing at her hair as the countryside blurred into night. Tears streamed down her cheeks, not from sorrow, but fury. She had been made to feel like an intruder in her own legacy. A tool in a war she didn't start. And now, she realized, maybe Damas had been right. Maybe peace was never the answer. Maybe the only way to claim her place wasn't through forgiveness, but through fire. Victor found her there. He approached slowly, careful not to startle her, careful not to speak too soon. "I didn't know," he said. She didn't look at him. You would have what?" she snapped. "Sent money? An apology?" Would you have even remembered my name? He said nothing. Audra turned to him, her eyes burning. You don't get to act like this is some beautiful reunion. You left us. You left her. And now you think a hug makes it better? I made mistakes, he admitted. But I see you now. And I'm not walking away again. She stared at him, searching for sincerity. For something real. But all she saw was a man trying to manage fallout. A man trying to reclaim control. Then you should have been better, she whispered. And she walked away. Back inside, Nikki sat alone, her hands trembling. Nick and Victoria whispered plans. Billy was on the phone with security. Adam stared at his father's empty chair, his expression unreadable. And far above them, in the dark compartment filled with cameras and secrets, Damas smiled again. Because this wasn't the end. This was only the fracture. And when families crack, they don't always heal. Sometimes, they collapse. Would you like to continue into what Audra plans to do next, or how Damas might use her anger to turn her fully against the Newmans? The soft glow of pendant lights bathed the modern interior of society in a warm, golden hue, casting flickering shadows on the polished glassware and gleaming silver cutlery. Evening conversations hummed softly across the restaurant, but at the table tucked discreetly near the corner window, Amy sat across from Damian with a spark of energy in her eyes that couldn't be hidden beneath polite restraint. There was something about the air tonight, anticipation, mystery, the electric thrill of not knowing what lay ahead. She swirled the last of her wine in the glass and leaned forward with a sly smile, her voice low but tinged with excitement. I can't stop thinking about that party in France, she said. Everyone's talking about it like it's some kind of royal unveiling. But this Damas, who is he really? Damian gave a dry laugh, one corner of his mouth twitching as he leaned back in his chair, his gaze flickering toward the ambient bar lighting as if searching for something behind the moment. Audra said the same thing to me earlier, he replied. That there's something magnetic about the secrecy. The way he just appeared. As if he stepped out of the shadows and into our lives without warning. He picked up his glass, took a slow sip, and then added, to be honest, I wouldn't know him if he walked in right now and sat down at our table. Amy watched him carefully, her expression softening. There was something different about Damian tonight. His shoulders carried less tension, his voice less guarded. He had always been the enigma, the quiet storm wrapped in ambition and unspoken pain. But now there was something else, stillness, perhaps, or a faint touch of vulnerability beginning to show through the armor. You've changed, she said, her tone unfiltered. I mean it. When I look at you now, you're not the boy I used to know. You're a man. A successful one. He smiled, but there was no triumph in it, only reflection. It wasn't easy, he said, and the words seemed to echo somewhere deeper than the space between them. It's been a roller coaster. Not the fun kind with scenic views and cheering crowds. More like the kind that breaks down in the middle of the ride and leaves you hanging upside down with no idea how to get back down. She nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of her napkin. I think things are finally changing, she said gently. For you. For the better. You're not alone anymore. You're about to work with people who care about you. Who want to build something with you, not from you. Damian's eyes clouded slightly, the shift almost imperceptible but real. He looked away, as if the truth in her words was too sharp to meet directly. I'm still trying to make sense of it all, he admitted. At first, I was angry. Furious. I didn't know what to do with all that pain, so I buried it. For years. But now. I don't know. Maybe time makes things less jagged. Maybe it dulls the edges enough that you can actually pick up the pieces. There was silence then, thick and charged. Amy's breath caught just slightly as her mind tiptoed toward the one question she had been too afraid to ask directly, too afraid to disrupt the fragile peace they'd found since re-entering each other's lives. But it clawed at her now, impossible to ignore. "Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me?" she asked softly. "For keeping it from you? For all those years I let you live without knowing the truth?" The words hovered in the air between them like a fragile crystal, balanced on the edge of shattering. Damian didn't answer right away. He turned the glass in his hand, watching the amber liquid catch the light. His jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, but in the battle of processing. Of truth and consequence. "I don't know," he said eventually, his voice low. "Some days I think I can. Other days, it just hurts too much." Amy looked down, blinking hard against the sting in her eyes. She had rehearsed this moment so many times, how to explain, how to justify, how to make him understand. But no explanation could rewind the clock. The years she stole from him weren't hers to take, no matter her reasons. "But I'm trying," Damian added, his voice gentler now. "Trying to get to a place where I can look at you and not see the years we lost, but the time we still have." She looked up then, hope flickering quietly behind the sadness. "That's all I can ask." They sat in silence, not awkward, but heavy with everything that hadn't been said. Outside the window, the night breeze rustled through the leaves of the plaza, the world going on as it always had. But inside, the air between Amy and Damian was charged with a fragile possibility of healing, of reconciliation, of something new born from the wreckage of secrets. Still, in the corner of Damian's mind, the name Dumas hovered like a whisper too persistent to ignore. For all the emotional turbulence between him and Amy, for all the promises and regrets that sat like ghosts between them, there was something about this mysterious man in France that made his skin crawl. Maybe it was just paranoia. Or maybe it was something deeper, some unspoken instinct that danger was coming, that this party wasn't just a social gathering, but a stage set for a much darker act. And perhaps the real question wasn't whether he could forgive Amy. It was whether the truth, all of it, had really been told yet. Would you like me to continue this narrative into what happens when Damian and Amy arrive at the party and cross paths with Damas, or explore what Amy might still be hiding from him?